So the total grant's $2.8 million. If the Third Street Wharf price is $800,000, that leaves a balance of $2 million. And then that is then broken up 50% between the LST sewer costs and then improvements at the Third Street Wharf parcel. If, and this is important, if the grant is less, up to the first million after the acquisition cost still goes to the LST or the sewer cost. That's just how the agreement's written. So that is something to know. So the first priority is the acquisition of property. The second priority is the LST sewer costs, and the third priority is the Third Street Wharf improvements. That's how it's written out throughout the agreement. Again, this is just for illustrative purposes. We don't have the appraisals done yet, but just for easy math. So those are the kind of high-level changes that we're talking about within this agreement. The lease agreement for the campground lease is the big document that changes and gives us a lot of teeth in how that moves forward. It talks about how they have to maintain the campground, number of campsites that they have to maintain at 105, how it needs to be managed, things of that nature. We also have to provide them with an accounting of all the inventory that's in the campground, so that way they know what they're taking over and moving forward with making sure they're providing the same type of service that campers are used to in this interim period as things change. I also wanted to take a moment to provide some history on Fisherman's Landing, because I think this is important as well. I did send an email to the City Commission last week about how we got Fisherman's Landing, how it evolved over time. So in 1944, we purchased it from Consumers Energy to be a city dump, and we commenced to use it as a city dump. In 1968, the city received a state grant for both the launch ramp and the parking area. 69, the launch ramp opened, and the launch ramp finger piers restroom with 100 parking spots in 1969. In the mid-70s, there was a second grant for improvements to parking and other improvements at the launch ramp, and the electric was added for 44 campsites, and that was over on the east side of the campground that's there now. 75, as we were gearing up for that, the city leveled the remaining land using fly ash and foundry fill. That is where the campground is, and it received state grants for shoreline protection, landscaping, sprinkling, and site cleanup, things of that nature. In 1976, we received land and water conservation grants for funds for that beach area, the bathroom, utilities, parking, and landscaping. And then 97, we received another grant for launch ramp and parking upgrades. It is important to note within the grants, it does also talk about that we need to maintain these things in perpetuity. However, that's what conversion is for. When you convert property, that is maintaining that property in perpetuity. That is how the DNR sets that process up. We had a golf course, I've used this example many times, Chase Hammond, we sold that. We had similar grants there, and then we converted it into the bike path. We bought that property to convert it. So what the state is looking for when they say maintain in perpetuity really is, are you maintaining the recreational asset that we paid for in some way or fashion going forward? And it's always a trade-up. So it's not necessarily if you had 1 acre of property, you have to replace it with 1 acre of property. You've got to replace it with 1 acre of property plus. That's what we're doing here. And so when we talk about expanding public access, expanding the amount of public property that's on the water, that's one of the requirements that the state would have for us as we're looking at this property, and we have had conversations with them about the Verplank property specifically. So this is just the grant history and the amounts that we've received over time. You guys can all see those on the screen, so I won't go over what those are. I talked about them on the last slide. But the majority of the grants that we've received are related to the launch ramp and the parking, not necessarily to the campground. So I just want to make sure I point that out too. Oops. I also want to take a moment to break down some of the communication that we've received. I do want to note this does not include the change.org petition that has been talked about, or the communications through Connect Muskegon, but this is just individual emails that we've all received through the commission all email, which I also receive. So there's been 47 emails against. 4 of those are repeats. 6 were from city residents, 12 were from unknown addresses, and 22 were form letter contacts. Support, we received 11 emails, and that does not include 2 that we received this afternoon. 2 were repeats, 8 were from city residents, including both of those repeats, by the way, and 0 were form letter content. They were original letters by folks who took the time to write to us. This does not include emails that you might have gotten on your individual email addresses. I don't get copies of those. I only get the commission all emails. And I did go through and look at to make sure that I didn't miss any. We did searches. There was a FOIA request which came up with the same number. And so this is a very consistent number that we've received in emails to the city commission all email address. And we can break that down through reports from IT and things like that. So I just want to make sure I'm putting that into context, that almost half of the emails that we've received are form letters that people sent forward, and only 6 were from residents. 8 were from residents in support of it. So just keeping that in context. So also, let's talk about the long-term planning that's gone into what's gotten us here. 1987, there was a rezoning of Mart Dock. 1998, there was the first planning document that looked at how we move shipping around on Muskegon Lake. 1998 was also when Fisherman's Landing was left off the charter park list for the intent of having it be developed into something else. Oh, and also as an aside, in 1944, when we purchased the property, there was a Muskegon Chronicle article that I shared with all of you that at that point in time, the commission's intended use was as a dump and then as industrial property. 2017 Reimagine Muskegon Lake Plan talks about relocation of port activities. And then in the 23 master plan, we also talk about different ways to imagine how we interact on the lake. I also want to talk about the public engagement that we've done on this project. We've done a year of public engagement on this project. We first started having a discussion with the commission in the fall of 2024. At that point in time, because of the inclusion of the Verplank property in this discussion, which was also talked about during public comment tonight, there was a consensus among the city commission that it was worth having this discussion and having staff spend the time working with West Michigan Dock to come up with an agreement that you guys could give an up or down vote to on whether or not it was the right way to move forward. That's why we've been spending all this time on this project. This was at the direction of the city commission. In the first quarter of this year, in 2025, we did public engagements around town and online, where we had all the same information that you could access online that was done in the public forums. You had the ability to ask questions, get answers, provide feedback. September of this year, we had draft 1 of the agreement, which did not include the lease agreement for the campground and didn't have the revenue sharing numbers in there and things like that I talked about tonight. In the fourth quarter of this year, we did an additional public engagement Q&A session at Muskegon High School. These engagements also don't count the neighborhood association meetings that we've gone to. We also got county commission support earlier this month. And we've started the rezoning process. We've not finalized it. Tonight, we're talking about the draft 2 of the development agreement, which was gotten to you guys last week. Over 100 pages, so I'm sure you've read every single sentence in there. I know a couple of you have. And in time to digest this, and another 2 weeks looking at the final vote on this, hopefully. So we're just kind of going over high level what some of the differences were in the agreement. And again, this is the properties as they exist today, and this is what the property would look like at the end of this agreement after we've acquired the conversion property at Verplank. And this would be really looking at the city losing a gated campground and 48 parking spots, but we'd be gaining 107% increase in lake frontage. going from just under 2,400 feet of frontage to nearly 5,000, and a 63% increase in acreage from 22 to 36. One of the things that we've heard from the community, whether or not you're for the swap or this deal or not, is the desire to have more public property on the water. The challenge that we have in Muskegon is that the vast majority of the property on the lake is not public, it's privately owned. But the private entities haven't enforced their private property rights and have been generous with our community and allowed people to use it. And so that when it does become developed, when they do exercise their property rights to do a building there, it feels like something's being taken away. The only way the city of Muskegon acquires property on the water is if we buy it. That is how you get property. And this is an opportunity for us to purchase 25 acres that's on the south branch of the Muskegon River and on Muskegon Lake, and do a nature preserve and river walk similar to what we have, or similar to what our neighbors have in North Muskegon on the north branch of the river. Additional public access, and not necessarily other spots to put, launch boats and things of that nature, but ways that folks can interact with the water and nature in different ways are things that we've heard from our community for years that they want to be able to do, and this is a way to facilitate that. Will it happen overnight? No. When we acquire the conversion property, there will be a lot of steps that have to be taken, and it will take years to get it to where we want it to be, but we have a good idea of what those steps are. We're currently working with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaways Initiative to define what those next steps would be to get us into and beyond the planning process. We know that there are grants that we're qualified for that are not federal grants, that look to communities like us that have been delisted, that have done a lot of the work to get their waterways cleaned up and in a position where they can do additional work. The estuary restoration that would be able to be achieved from the acquisition of this 25 acres achieves an objective that the Watershed Partnership and the greater community has had for more than 30 years since we began this journey to become delisted. This is the next logical step, and it's a way that the city can meaningfully own property on the water that allows our residents to access it. And yes, it will take time, and there are unknowns on exactly what the end cost is going to be, but it's going to take years to get to that point. And if we don't take advantage of this opportunity, it won't be there in the future. So when we're looking at how we can expand that by 170% as far as frontage goes, this is the opportunity to do that. And do we want to let that opportunity go by? This is an agreement between two parties. This is a negotiated agreement between two parties. We are not going to get everything that we want. West Michigan Dock did not get everything that they wanted. And this was the best deal that we could come up with to present to you to try to achieve this objective of additional public access and additionally publicly owned property on Muskegon Lake. Now let's get in discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Could you back up a couple slides?
Sure.
One more. So for this map here that we're looking at 3rd Street Wharf,
Yep.
We see that the Terrace Point walkway is included, and I just want to get confirmation because the teal on the east side, that's not 3rd Street Wharf Mart Dock property, that's inclusive of the public easement on the driveway.
Correct.
For the hotel. Okay.
Yeah, so if you go to this one, you can see it's still there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of little there.
Okay. 'Cause at one point we did
Yeah.
talk about potentially having a portion on the east side
Sure.
of
Yeah.
the 3rd Street Wharf. So I just wanted to get confirmation that
Correct.
that's not
No.
contemplated here, and the purchase agreement that we have or
Correct.
included here is okay.
Yeah, this is the road and parking lot and pier that currently exist.
Okay.
But we thought it was important to point that out because we were talking about
Integrated public access.
Yeah, integrating the public access, and so that's how you get to that. And the other thing, and this was talked about in public comment too, and since we're on this map, the Mart Dock proper site is not specifically addressed within this agreement. This is about Third Street and about Fisherman's Landing and about Verplank. Now, obviously, it impacts the Mark Dock because they would be moving operations to Fisherman's Landing if this was to go forward. Deed restrictions would go into place and things like that. The reason that still blew up there is because at the end of this deal, West Michigan Dock will still own the Mart Dock, and they will then have economic incentives to redevelop that property through a PUD or however they would see fit, but they would still own that property. And so what that is going to end up looking like at the end of the day is still up for question. They have worked with Smith Group, so there are some concepts out there. Those are only concepts, but they're also actively partnering with entities up and down the lake, including the county and Grand Valley and others, Parkland Properties, to make that a cohesive development along the front end of the lake. So that will change too. And, they could lease it, they could sell portions of it off, however they would choose to do that. That's not part of this deal, but that is a question we've got, it looks like they're ending up with a lot more property. They are ending up with more property. We're ending up with a lot more property than what we currently have too.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that the numbers that you speak to about net increase in public acreage, public access and acreage of publicly owned property is only referring to Third Street Wharf and or Plank property, not anything related to Mart Dock proper.
Correct.
That it is expected, as the president of Mart Dock has said multiple times publicly, that as part of any redevelopment of Mart Dock proper after port and shipping operations have been relocated and in pursuit of a PUD there for mixed-use development, that at least 50% of the waterfront at Mart Dock proper would be public accessible. But that's not, again, like you said, contemplated in this specific development agreement nor called out there. But that is what the end expectation is in trying to reorganize the waterfront.
That is correct. And I want to build on that point a little bit too. So in earlier iterations of this presentation and discussion, the area of Mart Dock basically where the LST is right now, we had iterations of this presentation that noted kind of in a hashed area that would become public. But because that's not contemplated in this agreement, it would just confuse the matter, so we took it out. But we do expect that as they redevelop that Mart Dock property, as the company's talked about itself, there will be significant public access through that area as well. It might be through easements, it might be through deeds, things of that nature. That all has to be figured out later. That is not a part of this agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Yep.
And thank you, you and your team and counselor and everyone at Mart Dock for the considerable amount of energy and attention that has been put to this initiative that got underway over a year ago, really got underway in earnest at the beginning of this year. You have devoted a great amount of time to public engagement opportunities, not only presenting to large audiences and small audiences, but giving considerable amount of care and attention to folks asking questions and wanting more information and understanding. And you've been very responsive. And our communications team's also been on top of making that information available on Connect Muskegon, updating that frequently, making sure that people are getting updates and notices when information is being added there, and everyone is in the know. Everyone that wants to be, having signed up for those notifications are in the know when new information comes to light, new events are happening, movement on this initiative is happening, when we're discussing it like tonight, when we anticipate voting on it. So I really appreciate that care and attention to the public engagement and public information aspects of this. This is a considerable undertaking with a lot of moving parts that is envisioned to happen over numerous years. Like you said, it's not going to happen overnight. This is a considerable undertaking that's going to take a lot of further investment of time and energy and resources to make this happen on all parties' accounts. And so what we're contemplating is kind of creating the framework for all of these opportunities to come to fruition. And we really appreciate all of the questions that we've gotten from the community, all the feedback we've gotten, whether in support of it, in opposition to it. in both regards, it's given us more to reflect on and questions to come to light for us to ponder and get clarification on. And furthermore, I really appreciate how this agreement has evolved from September when it was first brought to us for presentation and discussion. At that time, I was like, I couldn't approve that version. There were things that were missing, things that still needed to be tweaked or added, finessed and whatnot. And so I do appreciate how it's evolved, particularly with that. It's now seeing the revenue sharing commitment in there, which, by the way, because just a point for clarification, your presentation mentioned net profit sharing. In the agreement, it speaks to operating margin sharing. So I just wanted to confirm that we're looking at operating margins, not net profits outside of like the core business and everything.
And that's, I think, really what is still a key piece there, is how we're defining that term, whether you say net profits, whether it's the net operating margins. I believe within the document itself, it's a defined term. And the portion that should be bracketed off is how we're then going to define that defined term.
Okay. The brackets I saw in there in terms of is who it's going to go to in terms of like the entity that would be
There should be a
created.
bracket right below there. There should be two brackets within the section of the development agreement.
Let me look at operating.
Yeah, on page 4, Mayor.
Operating costs. Let me look at operating margins. Okay. Yeah. W's operating margin shall mean okay. Well, typically operating margins is narrower than net profits. And net profits, you have opportunity for additional non-core business income as well as taxes and like, other external expenses. I'm pretty sure it's broader and. But you'll be hashing out exactly what operating margins means. But operating margin seems more to the point, to the business activities happening on the property on site. But that is to be fleshed out further exactly what that means. So thank you on that. So yes, appreciate that the revenue sharing commitment's been added and the cost responsibility for the pavilion and natural soft shoreline buffer has been added and the commitment to our commitment to the public amenities remaining because that wasn't clear in the previous version. We'd spoken about it, but I'd like to see that it's reflected in the agreement what our commitments are to the public amenities remaining at Fisherman's Landing outside of the campground being redeveloped in a portion of the parking. I do have further thoughts. I do have further questions, but I'm going to open it up to the City Commission before I share those fun things. So, Commissioner Kilgo, take it away.
Thank you. First, I'd like to just say to one of the comments that was made during public comment, aside from any agreements with anyone in the city, I stand up for my colleagues and my friends like Commissioner Cochin. And I just want the commission to know that I've spoken about it before, like safety and respect. Those things go a long way. I have spoken with one of the developers about the situation. So I am separating those two things, but I want my colleagues to know that I stand up for them and their safety first. Mr. Manager, the easement, the map that we have in front of us, is there going to be an easement? Because I remember a little bit different map. Maybe I'm thinking wrong, but from the parking lot and the boat launch, will there be like a side road or something, or will they have to access once we get that estuary done from another?
So the way that it's been discussed initially was that there would be a road on the edge, kind of by a driveway, not a road, by the bike trail that would access there. There's also, internally, we've had discussions about, is there also ways to access it from, say, Richards Park, or obviously from the bike trail would be a very easy access point. So we'll look at those different ways to access as opposed to just one way. But that would be right on the edge of their operation area, which really wouldn't impact much there. So.
Okay. And I know that you don't know this, but I'm a trucker and I'm coming to pick up a load from them. Are they going to use the existing driveway, drive through the parking lot to get to Mart Dock? Do we know that? Like how are trucks going to come into that area?
There's already truck traffic in that area that you have accessing from a variety of different things. And that's my assumption, is that they would come through that same driveway because it's existing, it's a railroad, there's a railroad crossing there, things like that. One of the things with the shipping industry, and Chuck and Scott can correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of that activity happens either overnight or early in the morning. So like we have Holcomb, which they have a different name now. What was that?
AMRIZ.
Emrise, okay. Over by Heritage Landing, that is an operating silo that they do stuff for the cement industry. And so they have their trucks in and out before most people are up and on their way to work in the morning. Mart Dock, I think you currently have some aggregate, aggregate on site. Most people aren't going to see those trucks coming and going. You do see them leaving out of Verplank at a variety of times, but it would be more at hours where there's not a lot of people there. Now, obviously, fishermen come early in the morning, so there would probably be fishermen there, but, it's not, I don't think that it would be a logistically difficult thing to navigate. So,
Thank you. Will both the Third Street purchase from the city and the campground are both set to have independent appraisals?
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And if this goes through in the future, if West Michigan Dock wanted to do a mixed-use development, it would be a PUD that would have to come in front of the commission?
Yes. Well,
Unless they rezone it.
oh, yeah, I guess, yeah, if they were to rezone it to something that didn't require a PUD, but the expectation from the mixed-use development side is that it would be a PUD. So, and also if this wasn't to go forward and the property gets rezoned, as the Port Industrial PUD, that would also come back to the city commission.
Awesome. Two last questions, because I know that we have talked about this a lot, and tonight was helpful with some of the changes, so thank you for that. But in your opinion, as city manager, those three options for purchase of the Verplank property, that was for the Verplank
Yep,
property, right?
correct.
Which option do you think, if you had your choice for the city, would be best?
It would probably be to do them at the same time as the Mart Dock, for the reason that, then that way we can start working on the property, to get it, rehabbed and, ready for the public to use. If, like I said, I don't think we're gonna have 5 million to exercise the option without them. And, the second choice would be, if we wanted to take a little bit longer to save up and they were ready to go ahead of us, then we would, do that option, and that, might be a little bit more economical over time. But knowing what that gap is, and then, figuring out how to make that within the next 2 fiscal years, is something that we can look at. And then if it gets pushed back a little bit, that's fine too. But the thing that I want to avoid is the campground closing, and starting to do construction there, and we're not also starting to move forward with the others, things on the Verplank property that we want to see. Now they'll definitely be moving at different paces because there's different things that are going on. But once we acquire that property, then we can start, moving through that conversion process to get that 50-point deduction removed from us and move forward. So the sooner we can do that, the better. Because the longer we wait, if it was that third option, we'd be sitting in conversion that whole time.
Yeah.
Which isn't the end of the world, but it's still not fun to get knocked off 50 points on your DNR applications.
And my last question for now, do we expect by the December 9th meeting to have better clarification on the profit sharing part?
Yes, I think at this point, the expectation is well in advance of the December 9th meeting. The profit sharing agreement will be completed for the commission's review and the public's review, as well as the only other document that wasn't included was the assignment agreement that we will have with West Michigan Dock and the Verplanks to assign the option to purchase that is in your packet. It's going to be a very simple document that will largely duplicate a lot of the language that you've already seen in front of you. But that is, I suppose, the other document that was not included in tonight's packet.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kyogo. Vice Mayor St. Clair.
Thank you. The one question that I have, you talked about, excuse me, that there would be an appraisal indicated for the Fisherman's Landing property, an appraisal indicated to set the price for the Third Street Wharf. I did not see any indication of where the cost of the Verplank property comes from.
So that is the purchase agreement that has already been agreed to between the West Michigan Dock Company and the Verplank Company. So that number was already known, and that's the number that if we went forward with, we would need to use
So
as a basis.
there's no appraisal attached to that. This is an agreement between two companies that we're buying into at the cost that they set amongst themselves with no backing on that. Is that? Or is there documentation that we just don't have access to?
The number that we have in there is what we got from them.
Okay.
So I don't know if.
Can you
Okay.
speak to
Yeah.
where that number came from?
Yeah, it's the.
You wanna?
Hi, Chuck Keenstrait representing West Michigan Dock. That's a negotiated number over many iterations with the seller. And I don't believe there's any other background reports or data. I believe that price was offered to others, though maybe even city officials at one point or another. That's been a price Verplank has posted as a demand for that property for some time now.
Okay. That's concerning. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Vice Mayor St. Clair. I will be
I'll circle
revisiting
back
that.
if there's more questions that come
That's
up.
something that I wanted to touch on as well. So I'll address that. But right now we'll go to Commissioner Cochin.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, thank you very much for your time and effort on this. And I know that this has been something that the commission has asked you to work on. And so I appreciate your due diligence for working on this.
Thank you.
I do have some questions first and foremost, and I'm hoping that we can kind of get some of those cleared up and then some other things later on. But the first one, you were talking about the timing in regards to when shipping operations would be most likely to be occurring. And as somebody who does fish, I can tell you that early morning is when you want to go fishing. And I'm wondering, have we reached out to any of the tournament directors to discuss when the shipping operations would be, running to make sure that we're not colliding into each other?
No, because we don't know exactly when the operations would be occurring specifically with offloading. So that would be something that once it's up and running, we would have a better idea for, but that's a couple years down the road.
Okay, so we would have to wait until after making the agreement before
Yes.
determining when the hours of operation would be?
I mean, I'm sure it would be similar to what other port operators do, but ships come in at various times. The salt ships were in this summer in the middle of the week. I think it was the middle of the week. And there were still boat launches going on. There were people coming and going out of there as the salt ship came in, and then as it was offloading. And so this will be in the same area. The slip area is not large enough to have two ships in, so it wouldn't obstruct the slip completely. It would be similar to what's there now. Additionally, the ships that West Michigan Dock has talked about are barges, which are smaller in nature than the Lakers that we see in there now. So there would still be navigation areas.
I hear you there, and the concern more isn't with everyday boaters coming in and going, but when a tournament goes out, it's kind of a unique experience. It's almost like a race starting. Everyone's going constantly all at once, and it's not. It can be a little chaotic.
I'm sure.
It can be a finely oiled machine, but can also be a little chaotic. So it's a little bit of a different operation, which is why I asked if we had reached out to the tournament directors because I know that that's something that we've discussed at the meeting at the high school, concerns about the tournaments and whether or not they would be returning to the city, because we do want to have them return to the city if this deal does go forward. And I think that's an important thing to consider. The other thing I had a question about, Commissioner Kilgo asked the question about which one you would prefer, and you had mentioned what the options were, but I wrote them down as
Okay.
option 1, option 2, option 3.
Sure.
Which options were they? Option 1 and option 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Option one would be my preference, and I think that's the most likely scenario. And then option 3 would be the second. And like I said, option 1, West Michigan Doc's been looking to do this for a while, so I think that they probably I can't foresee a scenario where we would be ready to go and they wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I was reading those options, it sounded like there was a little bit of a clawback clause, but not quite, but more so that, Mart Doc would then have options to choose to do this, or the city would choose to do this. But I didn't see any explicit language that stuck out to me, at least, that said that the deal would, the land would go back to the city if we didn't do that.
If the options expired at the end of 27 and nobody exercised anything, then it would be, they would still have the campground lease there, but it wouldn't, but then the conversion property wouldn't be an option. So there would be that possibility. I wouldn't foresee that occurring, but it's, the purchase option that West Michigan Doc has on the Verplank property is an independent document that they have that option expiring in December 31st of 27.
Okay, all right.
And in that scenario, they'd be obligated to continue operating as a campground if nothing has been
For 50
exercised.
years, right?
Yeah.
And I suppose another way to look at that would be option number 4, the option to purchase agreement that you have in front of you with the Verplanks. If it expires and it goes unexercised, we'd effectively be in what would be the new status quo, because the ability to either exercise the option to purchase Fisherman's Landing and the obligation to terminate campground operations is conditioned on, among a few other pieces, the purchase of the conversion property or an alternative property. So there is a scenario, so it's not an absolute with option 4, that the city does find an alternate property to use to complete conversion, which could, as long as all the other requirements are met, still allow camping to be terminated and allow the agreement to move forward. But really right now, I think the agreement and all of our intent mutually is to exercise one of these 3 options before the expiration of that date. So I guess I'd view that as maybe the worst case scenario. Something went seriously wrong. What we're contemplating today didn't occur as intended.
Okay, gotcha. But there's not anything in there speaking to the fact that the lease would be forfeited and the land would, basically the lease would be forfeited. There's nothing in there saying that, correct?
There's
In those 4 options.
no, not within those 3 options. No, I mean,
Okay.
they all, in some way, if it's going to go through, if we are either unilaterally or mutually purchasing the Verplank property, it's done so with the intention that the city would retain rights to the 25 acres, and the remaining 35 acres would go and integrate into the lease agreement. And so really, we view this as an integration into the lease agreement, which I believe is why in that language, you'll see a defined term for exercise. And so in option 2, it would give the West Michigan Doc the ability to integrate a portion of the Verplank property into the lease. In option number 1, it's automatically integrated at closing. We'll have an amendment to integrate it. And in option number 3, it integrates as soon as West Michigan Doc completes the purchase, which is why there's the early termination fee, because at that point, it's all integrated into the lease agreement, because the city in any of these scenarios is the direct owner of the property in any of them, which would allow us to remove it from the lease so that we can then operate it as the city sees fit.
Okay, and then just for further clarification, because when I was reading it, I swear I read this section with the options at least 4 times, because I was getting a little cross-eyed by the time I got to that section. But there's mention of land converting to the city for $1.
Yep, and so I think that language will in part need to be amended, given the revised understanding that initially when that language was drafted, it was with the intent that West Michigan Dock would complete the purchase and then immediately deed it back to the city for $1. What we're working through, and I think you might have some red line language left in there that we're working through, is that in reality, we're going to have it deeded to the city at closing with West Michigan Dock footing in that scenario, option number 3, the full $5 million bill up front.
Okay, gotcha. All right, that helps clarify some of that, because I was like, where's the dollar portion?
And, Chuck wanted to add something.
Excuse me. Just wanted to talk about the length of the option. Keep in mind here, an owner is being asked, actually, West Michigan Dock, upon entering into a development agreement, should we approve that, would pay the option fee of $200,000 to hold this option period. Okay, so that's an out-of-pocket expense just to have this time. And that was a tough part of the negotiation with Verplank, is to get them to set aside their other use ambitions on the parcel for that long of a period. And we do expect, we're okay with that, because we expect that we can make our decisions based on whether it's public and or private investment interests in the project come to fruition. We believe it can happen in that timeline. The notice of funding opportunities for both Port Infrastructure Development Program and Build Act are going to come out late this month. And so we expect that if we do this, it'll be part of that effort, and then we'll know in that cycle whether we're qualified and can meet the kind of timelines that have been set up for the option, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and just because since you mentioned it, did Verplank mention what their other use for the land could potentially be?
I'm not at liberty to share that. They shared some in our negotiation, but they're private use interests. There are other parties that are interested in the parcel. We've tried to make sure we have kept the option alive, and it's just taken some time. We've drawn them out almost a year in the conversation, just trying to get to this point. So effectively, it's a 3-year option, not a 2-year option.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Koshin. Commissioner German, anything to ask or add at this time?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager, for that report. And the questions from my fellow commissioners. When you approached me about having some dialogue with the Michigan Dock Mart, did I say that correctly? Is it Dock Mart or
West
Mart
Michigan Dock.
West
Yeah.
Michigan
Yep.
Dock. Okay.
I do.
You know, I was open to it. You know, and you know, because just having dialogue just to see what it looks like. So, and now we're here. So my first question is, we've had these conversations for quite some time. Okay, and how many times have staff came back to the commission with a proposal that we was not satisfied with? Just off the top of your head. And then had to make tweaks to it, because there's been quite a few of them there.
Actually, no. There's been a lot of discussions over the years, but the only proposal that's ever come to the City Commission is the one that came to us in September
Right.
of this year.
Okay.
So in all the previous years
But
that
the
this has been
conversation,
discussed,
right.
the only thing that had ever come to the Commission for approval was a letter of intent to have that dialogue and those engagements years ago. But no formal proposal, no draft of a proposal
Right.
agreement has been brought to the City Commission for consideration until this time around, and in September.
Okay, so I'm asking, okay, well, due to those conversations, and but every time the staff has come in front of the commission, there's always been something in addition that has been added, and the reason I address this is because, to me, it seemed like at that time everything wasn't really thought out, and I'm finding that this needs to be done, or this needs to be taken out. There's not an agreement here. There's some uncertainties here. So that's my concern, but that's what happens when you have dialogue. You try to get to that point where you can come with an agreement to see what's best for both parties. I understand that. Now that we're here, You talked about the history. You heard from the community. Um, have there ever been any consideration about just putting this on the ballot and let the citizens of the Muskegon decide whether they want to do the swap? Because I hear, what I hear is, well, the people that want the campground don't really live here. They, they live outside. So why not give the residents the option to say, hey, whether they want to swap this or not? Have that been proposed?
The city commission did have that discussion
I think it was August.
August,
session.
about whether or not to put it on the ballot in November, and the decision was made not to do that. And
Well, there was we only had 4 members of the commission at that meeting, and it
Yeah.
required all 4 members of the commission to act uniformly on moving that forward, and there was not sufficient support to move it forward, and we were under the time constraints because a decision had to be made before 4 p.m. the next day, and so it was and was that in August or September? That was.
it would have been August.
It was August. Okay. Because I remember she's the one that told me the deadline. I was like, oh crap. I was like, we
that's not gonna
don't
work.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to act ASAP.
Wasn't
And
on
so
the agenda.
no, it wasn't. It was
Yeah,
brought
it
up-
was not on the agenda.
It
It
was brought
was
up
asked to
under
be.
at the end of the work session meeting because it was time constraints. Because I was anticipating bringing it to the legislative policy committee meeting for consideration and discussion then about whether or not the commission had appetite to put that on the ballot. But because of the deadline for getting for the clerk's office to submit anything to get on the ballot, we had to act by that August work session. So it was just added on for discussion, and there was insufficient support to move it forward.
Okay.
I believe you were not at that meeting.
No, I was not at that meeting. Probably in school because I started school, so had to be there. But okay, given that said, now then I hear, the term, more or less like a sense of urgency. We have this $2.8 million that have to be spent. Is that the end all be all? If we don't use that grant, is it not to say that something else may not come up from the state? A city has a real good relationship with the state over the years that I've worked here. It may be even a larger grant to do more.
No, this was a direct appropriation from the legislature that came in 4 years ago,
Right.
prior to my arrival here. We've received 2 extensions from the state to get to have the money be spent by. That the latest extension, which we've been told is the last extension, would be for December 31st of 2026. The last deadline was December 31st of 25. We got that extended. The former legislators who worked to get that money for us indicated it was for a wharf project in the city of Muskegon. The original intent and discussion of the money was really related to buying the previous agreement, as was stated during public comment, buying the 3rd Street Pier, the 3rd Street Wharf, and then the West Michigan Dock Company acquiring the campground. That's what the money was intended initially for. The enabling legislation has a more vague description. It just says a wharf project within a community that's our population, in a county that's our population. That's how the state does their appropriation. So this wasn't a grant, this was a direct appropriation, and I think one of the challenges that we would have is if we're not able to spend this money, the ability to ask for similar appropriations in the future might get more scrutiny because we've been trying to get to a point to spend this money on this project for a number of years. Is it the end of the world if it doesn't happen? Probably not, but it's this is a really good opportunity for us to expand public access, achieve objectives that we've had, and this was the state's way to help facilitate that objective.
Okay, and thank you for that. Now, given the fact that there may be other opportunities, if not, this doesn't go forward. One concern that I have, and I've heard you mentioned where the dollars will be allocated to. I think you said LST and sewer
Silverside.
Silverside, yep. Now, just say for instance, if the cost of construction bids, utilities, sewer relocations supersedes the estimations of those projects, who would pay for the additional costs?
So the grant money that the city received, the $2.8 million, that would be used for the acquisition of the property and improvements of the Third Street property. And we're agreeing to allocate 50% up to the, $1 million, 50% to the LST. Any additional cost that would be incurred there would be on those private entities, the Silversides, the LST. So I'm sure there would be capital campaigns there, but it wouldn't be on the city.
Okay, and sewer would be on the
The
city.
sewer project, that the only reason that sewer line would need to be relocated would be to accommodate the quote unquote dry docking of the LST. The sewer line doesn't make a lot of sense there. We're not quite sure why it does that jog, but it does. And so it would end up being, moved into a straighter line, kind of running parallel to the railroad tracks. But for some reason it does this jump. And, so for us, it's actually, not a bad thing to have a little less pipe in the ground and a straighter shot. There's less chances for things to go wrong. So.
Yeah, and that's just one example. I was just trying to figure out, like, if the estimates are off, who picks up the additional cost? That would be the citizens, right? The public.
No, well, for the park improvements, it would be on the city, but we would be using a portion of that grant to do those improvements down there at the Third Street Wharf. Things related to the LST, if the Silversides was to join them, that would not be on us because it's not a publicly owned asset.
Okay. I think that's all that I have now. Thank you, City Manager.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Sherman.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gorman, do you have anything to ask Brad at this time?
Just some more perspective questions as we've dug into the history of this. Can you, is there a sense of how, when the city commission has prioritized access to waterfront, like formally in our strategic planning that has dictated master planning?
Sure. I think, going back to, I think really throughout our history, if you go back to when we acquired Pierre Marquette from the railroad, that was the start of us looking at public access. And no one compares to us when it comes to Lake Michigan public access. Every inch is publicly accessible. Every inch is owned by either the city or the state. You're going to be hard pressed to find another community that's the case on Lake Michigan. And then Muskegon Lake for a long time was an afterthought. Obviously, the town, we had our back to the water. We had our foundries on the water, which had really good paying jobs for folks here in this community and allowed people to have, to prosper and be, lifelong residents here and build families. And then as we started to get more access, looking at the water a little bit differently, probably would start in the 60s, late 50s, early 60s. I don't know the first time, if Planner Pesh was here, he'd be able to tell me probably off the top of his head
Shout out to
when the first time it popped up into the master plan. But I think in earnest we started talking about it in 1987 when we did the rezoning of the Mart Dock property, and we started looking at how do we start migrating things there. We've also found older documents that talk about consolidating port operations, that talk about interacting with the water to a certain extent, and how do you get there. And for a long time, even when I was a kid, the Shoreline Drive wasn't there, and getting down to the lake house, which was then Rafferty's, it was weird, and that was the point downtown where you could see the water. So I think in the late '80s into the '90s is when that started in earnest. I distinctly remember as a kid going to the Y for swim lessons. And one time the door to the pool was open and I could see the lake, and I never realized that the lake was there. And I went to the Y, I don't know, 5 times a week. My mom worked there at that point in time and, did swimming lessons, didn't really realize it was on the water. And that building was built in the 70s? 78. That was a good year. Like even looking at that, there were windows in the Y that looked out, but it wasn't the majority of the building. The pool was put on the side of the lake, when you had all this stuff to take advantage of.
Well, and then can you speak to actual, I guess, formal attempts of this work? Because
Sure.
I feel like we're getting asked about that a lot.
Yeah,
Of what's
so-
making this time different?
I think what's making this time, so I think it started in the 90s when you start looking at the Imagine Muskegon Lake Plan, you look at the master plan and you look at how all those components work together. What's different this time is it's not just one entity saying, we need to look at this, we need to do this. There have been multiple entities from West Michigan Dock to the city to the county to Parkland Properties to Harbor 31, like, all these different entities that are along the water are talking about how do we make this happen and what does this mean for the future of our community in a way that, as was stated at the county commission meeting by Commissioner McGuigan, making our lakefront make sense, making things flow together in a way that it'll all work. But you need to have the willing partners at the table. And we have that now. That's what makes this different. And the city for the longest time was the one that was driving this. And the city was the one that was saying, we need to make this happen. And now we've got willing partners at the table, and we have to figure out how to work with them to make it achievable. And that's what's different this time. All the parties are at the table saying we want to have this happen. We have, when I presented at the Muskegon Lake Watershed Partnership in January last year, they were really excited about this because of what it meant for public access and the estuary restoration. When you look at various different things related to development and how it impacts all these different things that we're working on, you have all these puzzle pieces coming together, and the city in this instance is the linchpin. The city is the one that is going to be able to make this go forward in the way that we've envisioned for 30 years or not.
I'm just reflecting on it, and I'm staring at our new branding. Our identity with the water came up so much in that branding, and we've said this before, but we all have the opportunity to meet with the city manager individually constantly. I just want to say I can see echoes of everybody on this commission reflected in this agreement. I can see where we all are coming at this at different ways and what has been a priority, and I really I also see the perspective from the parties we're looking at, and I just think it's a very unique document that has taken a year that I hope you all see what you've asked for reflected in here. So I don't have any specific questions because they were already asked by Commissioner Kilgo, but just wanted to provide that perspective.
Thank you, Commissioner Gorman. Before we do follow-ups, so one of the things that changed from the version in September versus today is recognizing who's responsible for the cost of the pavilion. And when I broached that, I wanted to address the fishing dock at the same time because both of those are what are being affected where the property line goes now, because you could move the property line a little bit west, and then it wouldn't impact the pavilion and the fishing dock. It's desired for the line to go where the line is, so that's going to require the pavilion to go. And so in the new version, West Michigan Dock and Market is committed to being responsible for that cost, which I really appreciate. But at the same time, and it should be, it's natural. This is a result of an agreement that a development they want to move forward, and it's going to impact these public amenities, and so naturally they should be having some responsibility for relocating those public amenities. But the dock's not referenced there, so presumably, hopefully that's an easy fix. That the dock could be incorporated or added, whereby MarDoc is committing to be responsible for the relocation, the replacement or relocation of the fishing dock there as well, which presumably will be nearby to wherever the pavilion goes at the same time, considering they are kind of integrated now as it is. It was mentioned earlier, there's a couple things I want to address, one of which is the grant utilization. something that I had asked about and had expressed some concern about after the previous version. So we get the $2.8 million grant. What's contemplated here is we subtract the valuation of Third Street Wharf, whatever that comes at. We have an independent appraisal that if we don't agree to, we're going to do one appraisal, and if neither one of us agrees to, then we're going to do two separate appraisals, and then we're going to take the average of those appraisals to determine what the price of the Fisherman or of the Third Street Wharf property is that the city will be acquiring. Whatever that valuation ends up being will be subtracted from the $2.8 million as contemplated in the agreement now, and then, and in your example, you used $800,000. We don't know what it's going to be right now, but that's the number you used. It could be $400,000, and then we got $2.4 million left. But according to this agreement, we're committing to signing half of that to, which in that case scenario would be $1.4 million, to purposes of sewer line relocation and relocation of the LST
Yes.
and a site prep for that work. In which case, the first $1 million of that would go towards such efforts, and then we'd have money that we could put into park investments. And then if it ends up being, because in that scenario it's a split of 1.2, they'd get the first $1 million, or not they. $1 million would be committed to that work.
Yes.
Then we'd have some money for the park. Well, we'd have to figure out what that 50% is at that time because it's 1.2. So I guess the next $1 million would then be able to go towards the park, and then the remaining would be split, $200,000 for such work. My concern is that sequence of events there. Like, I know that we got reassurance from the state that deadline, at least from MEDC, that deadline for utilization of that $2.8 million goes through the end of next year. The way it's worded is grant funding received. Right now, we've received half of the first tranche, or the first enhancement grant. So our first tranche is half of that first enhancement grant, which the first grant was $1.5 million, and the second
Yes.
one's $1.3.
Yeah.
So we've gotten $750,000 presently. We need to, once we start spending that down and utilizing it, then that unlocks the next 1.5. And
Yeah. Yeah.
Then,
So once we start actively spending that, then we can get the second half.
and then
yeah.
that brings us to 1.5, and then it will unlock the next portion of 1.3. And while we have assurances from MEDC that is available through the end of next year, there's still some risk that the state legislature decides to claw back any or all of that. And so that's my concern in this sequence or scenario. And it's not about opposition to using it to accommodate the relocation of the LSC. The LSC is very important to me, to my family, to this community. I want to see it preserved and still be an integral part of our community going forward. But I have some concerns about the sequence of events in terms of how that grant utilization is being done. Because our commitment as we're doing this is to create a new waterfront park for our community. And so it is not going to look good if we end up taking ownership of this property and do not have the resources to turn it into a public park. And then we're going to be left in the situation where so many of the people that are vehemently opposed to it are feeling vindicated, in their opposition to it. And so I have concern about that sequence of events. If there's confidence in that money being available to the end of next year, then there will still be money left over for the LST, but I would like us to be in a preferential position to have money immediately to go invest in that Third Street Wharf Park for public use and enjoyment. That would be my preference, and that is important to me, important to this community. And there still would be money, assuming that we're trusting in the MEDC and Lansing and the legislature is not rescinding any dollars, but there will still be money left over for the LST. But the priority, and as you said, the language speaks to a wharf park, and so that's the intent, and that's the overriding intent of those dollars. And so that's where I want to see that reflected in how the grant is being committed and the grant's being used. Not to say we couldn't use some of the money for the LST, but the overriding commitment and intent was for development of a waterfront park there. And so I really would like us to revisit that. And I'm even though I don't want to do this, but I'm even to the point where may ask the commission to amend the agreement when it comes to us to reflect that. But I'd rather see it reflected in the agreement that's brought to us. That is how significant that is to me, and I think to our community. With regard to the Verplank property sale price, since we're not getting an independent appraisal, because it's already a pre-negotiated value between Verplank and MartDoc, and they have the valuation that they used for that purchase option. And I appreciate that MartDoc is spending another $200,000 to extend the term of that purchase option to give us more flexibility and more breathing room on this. But I do have some concern about the prospect of, without having that appraisal and understanding the valuation of that we could be in a position where we're paying more on a per acreage basis for this Verplank property than we're getting on a per acreage basis for the campground. And arguably the campground is worth more given its current status and some of the environmental concerns and conditions of the Verplank property. Could be wrong, but that's what's mulling around in my head in that regard. And so I just wonder if we have opportunities to help mitigate that, because that, like you said, that's going to be on us. So north of $2 million that we're going to end up, if we of our 25 acres, it's going to be north of $2 million, something like what, 2.4 million,
2.2.
2.2, that we'd be obligated to purchase, and we're not going to get all of that from the sale of the campground, so we're going to have to cover the shortfall. Where we're going to get it from, we can start squirreling away money, but that's still going to be a significant chunk. And so I'm just wondering, throwing out some suggestions, ideas to reflect on, is whether we do parity. And I know that this isn't for Verplank, because Verplank has its purchase option agreement. This would have to be a scenario in which MartDoc is buying the property from Verplank, and then we're paying MartDoc for our share of it. In which case, potentially have it at parity on valuation, same price per acre as paying for the campground, as we'd be then paying for the Verplank property. Alternatively, getting a valuation discount. Oftentimes, when you are going after DNR trust fund grant dollars for land acquisition, the municipality has to do a 25% match, and that could be satisfied through land value discounting. So there's potential for discounting this, by using 25%, because that's how we've done with the land acquisition through the DNR trust fund. Additionally, to help mitigate this, if there's no movement whatsoever and $5 million is the price and we're paying pro rata and we end up having to do $2.2 million, then that's where I think that we really should be looking to our partners at the county, asking them for assistance. They have expressed unanimous support, their county board of commissioners expressed unanimous support for this initiative this week. It is contemplated as part of the operating margin sharing, the revenue sharing, profit sharing, whatever you're calling it, however you describe it. Those resources that would be shared, it's contemplated that the county would be part of that board or that group to determine how those dollars are spent. So in that regard, the county is going to have a position there, and if so, I really think the county should have some more skin in the game in terms of this land acquisition, and that could help mitigate the concerns that I have and that our community has, because we've heard this from a number of people in our community about the costs and what our obligations could be, and some of the concern around that. So those are some ideas to do as you please with, but I want you to know that is a concern of mine, and it may be of my fellow commissioners as well, but I wanted to speak on that. I think it's also important that we get a baseline environmental assessment for the Verplank property so we can get an understanding of its current situation, and as we work with partners like the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative on technical analysis and understanding what it's going to cost for remediation, we can have a better sense of that. That is very important to me, that remediation. Very important. As Muskegon Lake has been delisted as a Great Lakes area of concern, as we're working to be vigilant around the health and wellness of the watershed and the ecology there, that it's important that we get restored wetlands there and into a healthy state and then preserve them. So whether that's shouldered by us or we're able to get third-party grants, I think that's important work to do. But I'm confident we're able to get a good support from external partners in that regard. I do have two other things, but I'd like to hear though. Yes.
Chuck had something to say
yes.
about one of the things you were talking about.
Yeah, I just
So before
wanted
I
to
forget.
speak to, you mentioned the BEA on the Verplank property. I've had a chance to analyze that, and so interesting, the Verplank property and the Third Street Wharf have very well-defined, officially filed BEAs or restrictive covenants negotiated with Eagle. And as we know, and it's been mentioned, most all of the properties along the lake are infill. So it's, the parcel we have the least data on is actually the campground. So we know it's got a mix of mystery dump, we don't know what went in dumps, right? But, you know, we have some industrial fill on top of that. So as far as restoration goes, you're generally looking at contact restriction, right? Groundwater's off the table on almost all of these properties, right? So you use city groundwater, but from what we've seen, it's mostly contact, subsurface prohibitions or whatnot. So nominal amounts of capping to create physical barrier is generally the kind of restoration you're looking at. So I want to make sure we don't paint the Verplank property as something that it isn't. I think it's pretty similar to what we've seen along the lake there. That's all I wanted to add. Thanks.
Well, there's some unique aspects of it being a coal ash dump, which is different than the Third Street Wharf.
Yeah.
And so understanding what that is, and capping is a way, you know, when you're doing development to mitigate that. But in my mind, for restoration, it is about returning it to a natural estuary state, which is going to require us to remove those contaminants, and because even if we cap it, there's still the risk of, you know, rainfall dispersing runoff into the lake right there, because it's right on the waterfront. Particularly
Right.
as we talk about flooding situations as water levels rise. Right now we have water levels low,
Right.
but we know that it's going to circle around. But my preference would, I understand capping is an option as we, you know, look for doing recreational development there, other things. But my preference would be to secure the resources to do more thorough cleanup restoration and developing it into a healthy watershed or healthy wetland.
Right. Remember, the environmental analysis that they run on all these properties is simulated rainfall and infiltration through the property to see if there's contaminants that are solubilized, right, and taken from it. So I do think you'll see that assessment. And
So we do have that, the BEA that can be
yeah, the
shared with
BA
for
includes the TCLP analysis, which is that simulated it's a leachate system, right? It's to simulate groundwater moving through, rainfalls moving through and taking contaminants with it. So,
Okay,
yeah,
that'd
you'll
be
see
good.
that in there.
Good to have. Thank you.
Okay.
I saw hands up over here. Commissioner Cochin.
Yes, thank you. To piggyback off of all of that, I'm going to tell you a story about how I spent my day. I spent my day watching a kid and trying to educate her and nurture her, and also make phone calls and better understand the history of this property, as well as the contaminants that are on site, and try to figure out, you know, if another baseline environmental study has been done, or assessment has been done, a BEA. And the information that I got today runs a little contrary to what I'm hearing. And I am hearing that the baseline environmental assessment that was done in 1999. Unless a newer one has been done, I would love to see those results, but that's the first thing you want to do before you purchase a property. You want to know what is on it, especially when it was used as a fly ash dump. And I appreciate Mr. Mayor for bringing up those points, because I fully agree with all of those points. And the contaminants that are on that site are different because it was a fly ash dump. And so it puts us in a different regulation area. Instead of Part 201, we're talking the MMD. And so the regulations come down from the federal government. And then there's also a push from the state government to change from the federal government's current policy to self-impose your own remediation to enforcing remediation. And the conversation I had today was about that and about how that could very well be coming down the pipeline. And so much to Mr. Mayor's point, we absolutely would want to do the full remediation to make sure that people are being protected, because there are concerns about surface contact, but there's also concerns about groundwater reaching into the groundwater right now. And so if you look at the BC Cobb plant property that has been worked on and remediated, you see there's a lot more water there that wasn't there before. And that's because they took all of the stuff out of there, and they're still working on it. And they obviously have not filled it in with clean fill. It cost millions of dollars to remove that fly ash and remediate the site properly. And that is a huge concern of mine, of my constituents. We heard from some of them tonight about the concerns with costs. That's probably the number one thing I'm hearing from them, is the concerns with the cost, about the remediation and also the environment, and how that's going to affect people. Obviously, this is not property that housing is going on to right now. And that's a good thing, because they would not approve that. But there could be, commercial uses. Mr. Kane Street spoke to capping, and that would be ideal for that Mart Dock section that they're going to purchase, but not for what we're trying to do. Because we want, like the mayor suggested, is a more natural environment, and we want to do it the right way. We don't want to cut any corners and leave that to leach into the lake anymore, because we're better than that. Honestly, we've worked really hard to clean up our lake, and we're going to keep working hard to clean up our lake. We're not just going to give up on that. So in that same vein, there is fly ash in there, but there's also wood products that were used to fill in that land. And the amounts of wood products that are used, we don't have the exact numbers, but until we have a new BEA, there could be methane on that property. And that's a concern that we have at the Sappy property right now, which would not necessarily be a concern for the environmental plans that we have, but potentially if the Mart Dock wants to put a warehouse out there, that could be a hindrance to that plan. So all of that out there to say, I have a lot of concerns about the environment and the cost that it's going to take, and what that could even look like. Because if we end up pulling all of that contaminated soil out, which could be up to 8 feet deep of fly ash in areas, we might not have the land that we're talking about getting. We might just have more water until we have money to put the fill in. So those are the things that are swirling around in my brain when we're talking about how much this is going to cost. I would love to have more firm numbers and understanding of what this looks like. Because right now, the way the contract is written, the liability is on us if we purchase this land. And I don't want to see our taxpayers ultimately have to pay for that remediation. I appreciate the mayor's thought about putting the county and asking them about that help, because I think that would be nice, especially given what they did with the Dune Harbor Park. That might be a feasible option in communicating with the county and seeing what we can get there. But until we have that new environmental assessment, I'm not super comfortable with going forward with that portion of that. It gives me great pause. The other question I had for you was in regards to the LST. We were talking about moving it, but where exactly on that portion of the 3rd Street property would that go? Is it going in the blue or is it going in the teal?
Blue.
It's going in the blue. Okay. And it's going to remain private property, correct?
Yeah, it's that would be property that's still owned by Mart Dock.
Okay. Have we looked at, because you put that in the packet with the restrictive covenant, and it says specifically that there can't be residential units there, but there still are the wells there that are operating. And have we looked at what the cost is to finish cleaning that up and removing those wells? Okay. All right, thank you. That answers that question. The other question that I had Sorry, I took screenshots of my questions because it likes to delete them when I put them on the thing. Oh, the revenue sharing. So that's new, and I'm still trying to understand that a little bit better. So it's saying 0.3% of the net profits per 1 million in grants received. So it's only based on the grants that they're receiving?
Correct.
Okay, so if they don't get any grants, we don't get any profit sharing?
Correct.
Okay,
Aside from the regular taxes.
fair.
Yeah.
Yes, very fair.
And there, and to that point, Commissioner,
Yes.
there is an option, or a scenario, I guess might be the better way to say it, where if West Michigan Dock, in combination with the city, because we would also be co-applicants, because we would still own the property, weren't to be successful in that grant process, that West Michigan Dock would have the option to go it alone and self-fund the project. So if they were to go it alone and self-fund the project, then yes, the revenue sharing as it's in the agreement would not come into effect because they didn't receive grants.
Any grants,
And it's
okay.
not, I also want to point out that it's not tied to a specific grant. The grants that we've talked about historically have been the PIDP grant, but it's not tied to a specific grant.
Okay. I see. Yeah, I guess I don't understand exactly how much we would be looking at there. Talking about crunching numbers earlier, I would love to hear what maybe those numbers look like when we come to the December 9th meeting, to get a better understanding of what that could look like once we have a better idea of what the revenue sharing agreement will be. Because I think that was something, it was like a carrot dangled in front of us, like, oh, we
Well,
could
it
get
was-
this, but we would like to know what it is.
To that point, which you could potentially bring back. First of all, I appreciate that what's being offered is a revenue sharing or profit sharing, whether we're into calling net profits or operating margin, whatever it is. I think it's a good aspect of the overall initiative, and I appreciate that West Michigan Dock and Mark is proposing that and including that, because it's a recognition of public dollars going into their development and returning those resources back to the public. So I really appreciate that. In terms of what you could potentially bring forward, just to give some context, is if once we decide, the parameters of the operating margins or the like, perhaps then you could share a quarter or a year of your financials that we could then apply that to, and then we can just understand, oh, here's 0.3% of that, or here's 1.2% of that. If we get $4 million in grants, or if it's $10 million in grants, here's 3% of that, just to give some context. I think that might be helpful. But that's for you all to discuss if that's something that you're willing to share, or even if it's not exact, some ballpark. Because hopefully, when you relocate, upgrade, and expand, that number will grow. But at the very least, we could look at some rough approximations just to get a sense of what that might be. So.
The other question I had was is on page 200 of the packet, if that helps you. It's part C, where it's talking about the parties agree to act diligently in good faith with each other in connection with Mart Dock's simultaneous application for rezoning of Mart Dock parcel to allow waterfront industrial port terminal uses on no more than 65% of the Mart Dock parcel. So earlier they were talking about 50% of the Mart Dock being public.
So it's, I believe what has been stated in some public meetings that have been hosted at Mart Dock would be, something in that 50% range. Now, in this instance, what we're talking about here is if this development deal does not go forward, if the development agreement is not approved by the commission, Mart Dock, which the city rezoned in 1987 away from industrial port, would be the industrial port PUD, which would allow them to then do port activities consistent with the zoning at that site. So if that's the case, most likely you're not going to see a bunch of, you'll probably see some public access down there, but not as much as you would see if it was redeveloped as a mixed-use PUD.
Right.
That 50% was related to a mixed-use PUD,
Mixed-use
not,
PUD, okay,
not the
gotcha.
industrial PUD.
That
Okay,
65% is tied to the
Yeah.
rezoning that the commission approved in the first reading
Okay.
at the last meeting.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Sorry,
The waterfront front.
yeah, Scott, the waterfront, so.
So the clarification is that the 50% is not of the Mart Dock property, but of the waterfront
The
on
waterfront,
the
the
Mart
Mart
Dock
Dock
property.
property.
Okay.
Yeah,
excellent,
which is
thank you.
consistent with our intent through zoning, is to
Mm-hmm.
get more public access. Yeah, so it wouldn't be, if there's 50 acres there, it wouldn't be 25 acres that are public. It would be along the perimeter.
Right, okay.
But the point that you were just bringing up, that was about if this doesn't go forward, Mart Dock gets rezoned
Right.
to the industrial PUD, where they would then bring forward a PUD for development.
Okay.
But a portion of the property, wouldn't be that whole new rezoning.
Okay. I wasn't
That's-
sure if
that's what
that's still tied
talking
into
about.
that or not. So that clarifies that.
Yeah.
You already talked about Sorry, the words are very tiny.
I know how that goes.
Oh, the sign section.
Yeah.
So they're talking about the Fisherman's Landing site on page 227 of the packet. It said West Michigan Dock may erect, maintain, or remove such signs as it deems necessary. Is that going to be potentially replacing the Fisherman's Landing sign we currently have there? Because that's on city property, isn't it?
Let's see, the electric sign, I guess for lack of a better term, is in the right of way. Are you talking about the one that's closer to the office?
No, I'm talking about the electric one that's in the right of way.
Yeah, I don't think that would be impacted by the, she's talking about the sign that's on, Gideon. That wouldn't be impacted.
That would not
Yeah,
be
yeah.
impacted. Okay,
Yeah, because
gotcha.
that's still in the portion that we'd own.
That's what I
Yeah.
was assuming, but
Yeah.
there's some things in the the deal that, do a little bit more for one person and a little bit more for the other in another spot. So I wanted to see what we
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
were talking about there.
Do you know, about the signs, that signs might be removed?
Right, and that would be only within the confines of the leased premises, which, as I understand it, the electronic sign falls a good distance outside of.
Yeah.
Okay, and then in regards to that restrictive covenant that we were talking about earlier, the blue section where the teal is on the 3rd Street Wharf
Yep.
property, we're not going to have any mixed use there. We're not going to see apartments or housing.
We will not own that, so it would be up to the property owner on what they would want to do with that property.
Okay, so that's not part of
No.
the agreement at this time. Okay, that would be part of the PUD then.
No, that's,
But potentially under mixed-use PUD, but
Yeah.
Okay.
it's not part of the,
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Right.
yeah.
Can't be there.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm because there were talks about potentially having mixed use there and having the museum and stuff down there, and so wanting to get
Yeah.
clarification.
Museum would be on the other side, yeah.
You're talking about
Yeah,
this.
not at
I'm talking about
There'd be
this.
No housing in there.
Right.
There's a
Yeah.
restrictive covenant.
Yes.
there. They're talking, there could
They're
be
talking about
housing
that.
here.
Okay, gotcha.
The museum will be here.
Right, okay. So at closing, on page 288 of the document, it talks about having the environmental assessment being done. And that's in regards to the sale of the Verplank property. But that, I don't feel like that talks about the option where we're kind of doing it together. I don't feel like that's option 1. I feel like that's more option 3. Do you know if we're gonna get an updated environmental assessment?
I think of that one.
If they go with option 1?
Sorry, just for a brief clarification, are you talking about the option to purchase agreement, the one where the city would be able to purchase the Verplank property?
I'm talking about in regards to if we went with option 1, where
can you give section numbers, section and letters?
I did.
What specifically are you referring to?
it's page 288. Section C.
So this is not the development agreement, this is, an exhibit. This is real estate option and sale agreement.
Yep, and so if this is the option to purchase agreement, this is the document that would be assigned to the city, so the city would step in as the buyer. It'd be our understanding that both the city and West Michigan Dock would want to complete its due diligence as its right would be under that agreement.
Who's paying for that then, in that instance?
In that instance, if the West Michigan Dock wants to complete due diligence itself, it can fund it in the same way that I'd have the expectation that the city would also fund its portion of due diligence to make sure it's comfortable moving forward with the purchase.
Okay, so in the option where we're doing the purchases kind of separate and simultaneous at the same time, would we have to do our own environmental assessment and then they would do their own as well, or?
So any of the scenarios 1 through 3 have the city assigned the document. That there will be an additional document. It's one of the 2 documents that is not yet in front of the commission, but I expect to be a fairly straightforward document. But the underlying premise of why it's a simple document is it provides for the city to step in the shoes of West Michigan Dock in that option to purchase agreement, which would give the city the ability to exercise its due diligence as outlined in that agreement itself.
Okay.
And so, anything in that option to purchase agreement that provides a right or responsibility for really then us as the buyer, we have the ability to undertake.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that, thank you. So,
I'm going to go on.
Yeah, go on ahead.
I'm going to go on. Vice Mayor St. Clair,
there.
anything you wish to address right now?
The only thing that I would say is that I concur with you on the order of operations on 3rd Street Wharf. I would be very concerned that we would end up upside down if the improvements came after everything else. That is concerning to me. I feel like it is important that we not take a bath on this. And I'm not sure that we won't with it the way that it is currently structured. So sorry, I'm shutting down. I'm starting to lose my articulation skills. So,
Late.
but
yeah,
was that
with
clear?
regard to the
Yes.
2.9.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
I got.
So-
I'm tracking with you.
All right.
You had raised some concerns earlier too, or questioning about the appraisal and
Yeah.
valuation surrounding
Yes.
the Plank property. Given the conversation that since has had, is there anything that you have additional to ask or share on that point?
I understand that a purchase price was agreed to between 2 private parties. No longer an agreement between 2 private parties. There's a very public party thrown into this, and I am concerned that if we end up paying more per acre than Fisherman's Landing goes for, that is going to be very problematic. I don't know how we resolve that, but I also don't know what Fisherman's Landing is going to appraise at. So this might not turn out to be an issue, but that is something in the back of my mind that does have me concerned. Again, I'm concerned we'll end up upside down with that not clear. So is that? I think that was what I was talking about. Sorry.
Thank you, Vice
It's been a
Mayor
very
St.
long
Clair.
day.
We all need to do some jumping jacks like the
Yeah.
city manager
Yeah.
for the presentation.
Yes.
Commissioner Kilgo, I see your hand.
Yes, unfortunately, we're going to be upside down. Fisherman's Landing is being appraised. 67 acres of waterfront property with a private sale. If West Michigan Dock was not taking a loan from a bank, then it doesn't have to be appraised by an independent appraiser. So basically, it's private property. Verplank owns it. They have first right of refusal to buy it. Verplank could say $1 billion if they wanted to, because they don't have to sell that property because they've agreed to sell it first right of refusal to West Michigan Dock. They put that number on it. So is it worth $5 million? Yeah. If West Michigan Dock is going to pay $5 million for it, it's worth $5 million. If they said themselves to Verplank in those conversations, no way, Jose, I'm not paying that. But if we look, just down the lake at, Windward Point purchase a few years ago, they're in the several millions of dollars in the purchase for that. So we're talking about waterfront property, private property. Yes, the concerns that Commissioner Cochin brought up are things that I think that you're going to need to address to the public before the December 9th vote. But aside from those concerns on the property, just knowing real estate and it being 67 acres on the water, $5 million is not that out of whack. I just want to put that out there.
It's 52 acres.
50.
Okay, 52 acres, sorry. It's 52 acres waterfront property.
Pull that
They-
dump on the water.
It is cool.
Right,
It's
it's
not
not-
on the
Right,
water.
right. But what I'm saying
There's
is,
factors.
what I'm saying is, then if the commission doesn't want to buy it, then just vote no, and we won't have to worry about it.
No,
But
that's
if
not
it-
true.
But if,
There's alternatives. I don't disagree. And to your point with regard to this is a transaction between two private parties, and they can entertain whatever price they wish to, and what it sells at, that's the value that they agree to. But as Vice Mayor St. Clair was just indicating, we are a public entity, and we do have more concern about appropriate valuation. And so that's what we're just talking about here. How can we get additional resources, get a discounting, get a parity in valuation to help improve that pricing dynamic? But to the point of the valuation that Verplank and Mardock agreed to, that's perfectly fine. Those are private entities approving a purchase option.
yeah. So I'm good. I mean, I think that if there are additional questions, I have time. I can ask the city manager at not 11 o'clock at night. So I'm good.
School night.
Yeah. All right. There's only two other things that I want to touch base on. One's really simple, and I'll lead with that. The simple one: can we, before it comes to this December 9th, just stake out the property? And this is going to be y'all because it's your private property. Can we just stake out on the 3rd Street Wharf where? So we did this previously with other properties, just so the public can see. Yeah. The visual of the property line of where the city would be acquiring, so that we all can clearly see this is the property that the city would be acquiring at 3rd Street Wharf before December 9th. I think that would be helpful visual cue. And then the one other piece that gives me some pause in the agreement is with regard to assignability of the development and then the campground lease to a third party, whereby the city couldn't, city would have to sign off but couldn't withhold agreement unreasonably withhold approval on that. And so, I mean, this is an agreement that we've hashed out over an extended period of time with one particular party, a known entity that we're contemplating to a 50-year lease with a possible extension of 40 years, so potentially 90 years. And so something of this magnitude, it seems that if we're going to have assignability or transfer of this to a third party, that it would come to the commission first, and the commission would approve that. I know that there, in other agreements that the commission has been party to, when you do see significant changes to that agreement, it comes to the commission for amendment to reflect that. So I just want to acknowledge that gives me some pause and concern, and I would welcome that being addressed. But I think that we are at our end. I see one more follow-up, Commissioner Cochin. Before I go to you, I just want to know if there's any follow-up from Commissioner German or Commissioner Gorman before we do the final follow-up. Commissioner Cochin.
Nobody else? Nobody else? Okay. I would like to say that given the fact that we don't have a BEA and it's Thanksgiving on Thursday, they're not going to have one done by December 9th. I cannot imagine a world where that is done by December 9th. And I personally will not be comfortable, and I will absolutely question my other commissioners if they are comfortable moving forward with this without fully understanding the contaminants and the concentrations and how much this is going to cost the city, because we talked a lot about fiscal responsibility tonight and about how we don't have money for things, but we're talking about millions and millions of dollars potentially that we will be on the hook for, and we don't know. So I would like to see us have that information. I would like to see us have that information before we go to a vote on this.
Mr. Kingstree just said that they do have a BEA for Plank.
A more recent one,
Didn't they?
we're talking about a BEA from 1999. There's been a lot of time that has that has occurred between 1999 and now.
Yeah, if the conditions haven't changed.
Yeah, the conditions have
changed. the
not
property hasn't
changed. It's been
disturbed,
fenced off.
It'd be fairly comparable.
Yeah.
I had conversations with a gentleman who
I would
talked
first like
about.
to see the BEA though. You said you have one or it's on file with the state. I would like to see that one. In terms of the cost of remediation, I understand there's a concern from members of our community around what that total cost would be, and they want to see that price now. We're not going to get that price now. We're not. It's just not going to happen. This puts us in position to make that remediation happen. Puts it in the public domain, protects it from private development, and gives us in a position that we can pursue the remediation, whatever that cost may be. And it could be extensive, but that's where we're going to need to lean on our partners, whether that's the county, whether it's the state, whether it's the federal government, potentially looking at foundations or even public bodies, maybe even going after Consumers Energy as a regulated utility that contributed to the fly ash situation
able to
there.
do that with the way the contract's written.
Securing the resource. Well, we're not going to be able to commit the Consumers Energy into this development agreement to do that. What we're doing is creating the conditions in which we can do that. And so we're not going to have an exact number of costs for that, and we're not going to have the resources committed to do that remediation, but we're setting ourselves up to pursue that, which I think is a very important thing, that we're going to be able to have that opportunity to do considerable remediation, wetland restoration, and create a nature preserve comparable to the nature preserve in North Muskegon on the North Branch and on the other side. I think that's important and significant in and of itself, getting us into that position. But I understand the concern and the desire for that information. I just do not, even if we had many, many months, I don't necessarily think we're going to be able to come up with the total cost, because then you're talking about what range of remediation, and is it just going to be minimal, is it going to be the most extensive, and there's going to be a range. And so it's putting us in the position to have that, to pursue that, and then decide what's the best way to move forward. But yeah, that's my thought.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I still stand behind the fact, because if you sign up with the contract the way that it's written, then we take on the liability. We don't get to assign the liability to the BC Cobb plant after the fact. We don't get to assign the liability to the Mart Dock or to Verplank after the fact. The way that everything is written, and I just had this conversation today with the people from Eagle, it's going to be on us to take care of that. And so that is my concern, that's my constituents' concern, and that's why I'm speaking up about it.
And we want to take care of it. I think any fun? Yes. Sir.
Apologies. One additional comment of a way to address that. Within the option to purchase agreement itself, there is a due diligence phase by which the agreement could be terminated if it's not acceptable ultimately to, in this instance, the city as the buyer. A potential conversation to help extend that timeline may be extending what due diligence looks like, given the option itself runs for 2 years. At that same token, if something's unacceptable to the city, then it would have the ability to step out from that agreement, but only within the terms of the original agreement or whatever amended terms we've put together in the assignment of the option to purchase agreement. That to approve the agreement on December 9th isn't to guarantee and lock in the city 100% into that purchase, because we still have those due diligence abilities to say, is there something within due diligence that the city finds so objectionable that it would no longer want to move forward with that purchase? And so that's in the agreement you have, but outside of what we would currently contemplate in the assignment. But if that is a concern of the commission, that can absolutely then be an additional follow-up conversation.
But in that instance, is there anything in there saying that the lease would be terminated, or are we already locked into the lease at that point in time?
No, so we would already be locked into the lease, but both the West Michigan Doc's ability to exercise its option to purchase, as well as its ability to terminate campground operations, would not trigger until the city either purchases the conversion property or finds an alternative property.
Yeah.
And so if the city decided to not move forward with the purchase of the conversion property, it would mean that the lease is effectively a lease with no option. The campground operations would have to continue at that site, at least until the city found an alternative property that would satisfy DNR conversion, and satisfy the terms of this agreement.
Yeah, I hear you there. That's one of my concerns, because we haven't looked at, fulfilling that conversion agreement in other places really fully. Commissioner German brought that point up a couple of times at a couple meetings ago. And if we can't find one, then we're still out the waterfront property that we did have. And so that's why I'm voicing these concerns so loudly right now. Because in my mind, especially after hearing about the remediation at the BC Cobb plant and what that looks like right now, going, oh, the parts that are the most contaminated are right here along the waterfront and up there by the river mouth. That's the spot that we're supposed to get. So if we have to dig all that out and we don't have the money to fill it back in, we technically lose all of the land.
But
and I don't want to see that happen.
The campground does not go away until we have satisfied the conversion. So we have a conversion property, whether it's for playing property or an alternative property. The campground will not be discontinued until we have.
Correct. But we won't be the owner. Like,
We'll be
the
owning it and
owners,
leasing
but we
it.
won't be
But
operating it.
The use of it will continue.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
yeah.
But my concern is that we won't be operating it for the 50 years, because that's a
No, the
long time.
campground has to continue.
But we
so the-
won't
but-
operate
but-
it.
But we don't
Is
operate
my-
We don't operate it
But
now.
we've never
I hear you.
operated.
So the campground would continue until we have that conversion property. Yes. So, final thoughts
Yeah,
or things
so-
you want to share with us before we wrap this up and go,
Yeah.
well, before we go to public comment and adjourn for the night?
Sure. I appreciate the conversation and the feedback. It's valuable, and it does gives us something else to talk about. Probably on Tuesday, because Monday we will be working on the other thing. But when I'm looking at this, one of the things that I've asked myself regarding the Verplank property in particular is who's best positioned to ensure that it gets done the right way and that it becomes publicly accessible. And that's a public entity. And we're that entity that's in the position to take advantage of that now. And do we have all the answers to that? No. And I know that people are going to latch on to that. But I think we need to be able to take a step back and look at what the possibility is moving forward in the future for public access in the city of Muskegon. And that if we don't take action now to acquire the property, clean it up the right way so that the public can use it, it's not going to be an option that we're going to have in the future. We're not going to have future opportunities to acquire this amount of waterfront property in the city. There just aren't that many places left. We've got an option on 10 parcels in Windward Point. And that's about it. And it's because it's all privately owned property. And so if we're really serious about looking at having publicly accessible space on Muskegon Lake and expanding the amount of publicly accessible space that's actually owned by the public, this is the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Appreciate your presentation tonight, and like I said earlier, all the extensive work that you've put into this, both behind the scenes and out in the public and here tonight and all these other meetings. It is very much appreciated. And a message, something to share with the community and commissioners and everyone that's engaged in this process and paying attention, that I think we all have good intentions and the best interest of our community in mind. We have different approaches of what that looks like and what the end result would be, but I think there's a very much of interest in having public access. That is without a doubt. I think universal that we want public access. What that looks like varies, but we want to see public access. We want to see the continued restoration of Muskegon Lake and the watershed, and ensuring the health and vitality of that watershed, while supporting a working port and strengthening and further diversifying, having a broadly diversified economy that's going to be a resilient economy and that's going to support our citizens and our small businesses. And with regard to port and shipping, support West Michigan regionally. And so there's a lot of opportunities here that's being contemplated, from an economic development, from transportation, from environmental restoration and preservation, to new recreational opportunities. And those broad concepts are great, and I think that we all can get around them. And while there are folks who want to pursue that while keeping the campground intact, and others that are understanding of how redeveloping the campground by relocating Mart Dock's operations and creating new opportunities for redevelopment there and opening that up to the public. People have different values, and they weight things differently, and they approach things differently, and that's okay. Like, there's too often, and increasingly as a society, we want to vilify folks, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It ends up happening the way that we tend to vilify folks that differ from us and view things differently, or are on different sides of a position, and we don't need that. Like, we can disagree, but in agreeable ways and being civil. And I just, to Commissioner Kilgo's commentary with regard to how some of the public has responded and reacted, and also how some members of the development team have responded to this. And we're all human. We sometimes, passion gets the best of us, emotion gets the best of us. But I just want to reinforce that, like, let's be civil and kind to one another, even when we disagree. We don't need to vilify others. We don't need to act like someone's less than because they don't agree with us, or they're not doing their job right, or they're not. Anyhow, I'm starting to ramble because it is past 11 o'clock. But just, dang nabbit, be kind to one another, okay? Just let's please be kind and civil. So, Commissioners, any other business before we go to public comment?
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh yes, happy Thanksgiving, and we do have a community tree lighting this Saturday at Hackley Park. Tree lighting's at 6 o'clock. There will be other activities going on earlier in the day, including I think the on-road train ride starting at 4 on Clay Avenue. There are refreshments in the park. The Santa's going to be arriving, and it'll be presenting the key to Santa just before 6. Santa will be sticking around on stage for kids to come and get photos, and check out Western Avenue and all the lights and all the great small business that we have downtown. So come enjoy our wonderful downtown. So that's again this Saturday. So check it out. And then public comment. So would you like to speak, Mr. Ewing? Joining us from Glenside. Oh, and then I got another one. Okay. Well, thank you for your patience there. No, come on up. You're already standing. Let's go.
Paper. Yes, hello again, and it is late. My concern goes to the idea that how is this information going to be dispersed to the public so they have time to react to this, because the vote now is said to be 2 weeks away. They have to absorb this information, contemplate this information, and then come to the commission with their thoughts and ideas. And I'm afraid that 2 weeks is not enough time for the citizens of this community to react to this. And that is my major concern with what's going on here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ewing. All right, David Alexander joining us from Beechwood Bluffton neighborhood. Welcome, sir. You have 3 minutes to write your remarks.
I wish we still had a general newspaper in this town, but hey. Not I wish we still had a general newspaper in this town, but not the case. MLive will be doing things.
Yes. Thankfully, we have had him live all here all night.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mayor, Commissioner, staff, I'm David Alexander, Beechwood Bluffton neighborhood. I have 4 decades of personal and professional relationship with Muskegon Lake. I'm a sailor, kayaker, power boater on Muskegon Lake, and now live along the shores as an owner in Balcombs Cove condominiums. Professionally, I reported on economic development and on Muskegon Lake for 34 years for MLive and the Chronicle, and I have, as for 10 years, been downtown Muskegon manager with a great interest in the future of the downtown waterfront. Prior, I've come to you, and I continue to, and I will stay here this late because it's this important. I strongly support the waterfront development agreement. I plead with you for a yes vote on this project on December 9th. Support the general city and community interest over the special interest of those with a limited number of campers that are truly in opposition to this, many from out of town. This will be the most important vote you'll take, in my view, in your term on this commission. I applaud city manager and city staff for their dedication, their exceptional work on this, and how this plan has been evolving over that time. The mayor and commissioners, you have done your due diligence. Thank you. After months of work and compromise, the property owner and developers and products company, they also have found a way to become involved and engaged here. I ask you all to find a pathway to yes, based upon the importance here of the public access to Muskegon Lake, the lake's connection to our downtown and urban neighborhoods, and the economic development potential of this proposal as it looks to modernization of port operations and the redevelopment of the Mart Dock with highest and best use. That means future jobs and future tax base. I would point to you that it should not be lost on you that your Muskegon County Commission has been unanimously supportive of that. Tonight you heard from Muskegon Community College. You also heard from Greater Muskegon Economic Development and a longtime retired president from Muskegon Lakeshore Chamber of Commerce. Have a blessed Thanksgiving. I'll see you on September 9th.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. That's good time in there. Yes, sir.
Hi, Chuck Cainstraight from Chicago, Illinois. For 27 years, I have seen Muskegon as its own unique port in the Great Lakes, and I have been in many towns in the Great Lakes, delivered ships and materials into those towns. And in the last few years, we finally saw a movement in a generational way with our federal government to recognize the lack of investment they've made in our Great Lakes ports and our St. Lawrence Seaway system. That is what has finally spurred this. I feel like this has been herding cats for at least a decade here. It was described tonight by you, Mr. Mayor, that this is a framework, right? We know there are steps and iterations that have to go on after this, and we haven't made a request to put the city in any different state that they're in now as far as their campground goes. So I think the question boils down to the most simple beginning part of this conversation is, are we going to swap 3rd Street Wharf and the campground? The campground. The steps after the campground are the framework that we've worked for now years to set up in this agreement. Congratulations on the amount of effort that you've put in. We've enjoyed working with you in building this, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Anyone else in the audience wish to give public comment? I'll go to you, sir, because you gave a comment earlier, and then I'll go to you, Kathy. You sat here so patiently all evening. Kindly introduce yourself, sir, and if you're a city resident, which neighborhood, and if you're not a city resident, which other township, village, or city you're joining us from.
Yeah, well, forgive me, I'm first time never doing this, but my name's Aaron Ward. I live in Lakeside neighborhood, and well, I would like to thank everyone here who has spoken on the whole development for the Fisherman's Landing property and the swap with the 3rd Street and the reclaimed properties. I myself have used Fisherman's Landing, not so much the campgrounds, however, the boat launch myself amongst every other amenity there. Sorry, still very nervous. But as much as I agree with most of the arguments made for expanding lakeshore access, which I don't disagree with whatsoever, how about going about it, it might not be, in my own viewpoint, the best way of going about it. But as said from both you, Mr. Mayor, and various commissioners, environmental impacts on the properties that are being spoken about are key amongst many others when it comes to cost and overall development and use. Outside of here, part of my job is doing such environmental work, and basically just I'm happy with the fact that most of that is being taken into account for the decision, and I hope the best for when that vote comes on December 9th. And to wrap things up, have a good Thanksgiving to all of you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you joining this evening, and happy Thanksgiving. Yes. Kaylee Maynard joining us from Roosevelt Farm.
Enjoyed you guys tonight, and I think the thing that makes people uncomfortable is that you have to have that December 9 decision then, and you can't put it off and contemplate and get more facts and stuff. I think that's what's making people nervous about you going forward with it. But I appreciate that you guys are thinking about it and talking it over. It's been really nice to see.
Thank you, Ms. Maynard. All right, anyone else in the audience? All right, we are going to go to the phones. The calling number is 231-724-6721. This is general public comment. This is not a time for Q&A or back and forth dialogue, aside from greetings of Happy Thanksgiving. You can phone in 231-724-6721. Please turn down any audio in the background, state your name, and then identify which neighborhood you're calling from if you're a City of Muskegon resident. If you're not a city resident, which other township, village, or city you're calling from. And we have our first caller. Good evening. You're with the City of Muskegon City Commission.
Hey everybody, this is Leah Willett-Roy. I am calling quickly on a few items from tonight. Number one, 3rd Street Wharf. I want you to keep in mind contemplate some other possibilities and allowing that to remain a view shed. And so I would suggest that you look at potentially a solution like Boyne City, whereby they have a similar sized park on 3rd Street, as 3rd Street Wharf. However, they have commercial right next to it, which is what I will expect will happen at the Mart Dock. My expectation is that we'll have a feeling of something like a Navy Pier where there is shipping and commercial, retail, people walking about, but nearby have that park-like space. So I want you to keep that out as a potentiality, and also consider that what happens with Heritage Landing will greatly affect the best selection of use for this property. So it's good to see what the suggested designs are for Heritage Landing as you make those choices. Secondly, we talked a little bit about school districts this evening, and I want to highly request that all of the commissioners, if they have not already, complete ride-alongs with the City Police Department whenever possible. It's for two things. One is I want you to understand the way that we engage with youth through the police department, not only through in the schools, but on the street, and understand how different neighbors interact with their communities. And so those two things, wanting to make sure that we are engaging with the school district themselves and highlighting our youth wherever possible and their accomplishments, and then also being well informed of what it's like to be on the streets of Muskegon. And so the best way you're going to do that is to be able to participate in ride-alongs and see what folks are seeing on a daily basis. And lastly, I want to suggest that we talk about doing some type of homelessness policy and discussion summit in early 2026. It's obviously a constant concern in our community, and we know there are solutions that we might not be considering. Obviously, affordable housing is one of them. But we as residents need to know what are the solutions that we should be working on as well. How can we as residents really contribute and participate in the homelessness problem so that it has a viable solution? So thank you everybody for staying so late and always being there, and I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Ms. Willett-Roy. Appreciate you calling in. Happy Thanksgiving. I'll give you a few more moments for any other night owls planning to call in.
I go to work at 8 o'clock tomorrow.
All right, I do not think we have any additional callers. So, Commissioners, entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion by Commissioner Kilgore, supported by Vice Mayor St. Clair to adjourn. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you. Take care. Be well. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.